Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast. Introducing the new SANS Pen Test poster, Building a Better Pen Tester Blueprint. My name is Carol Ott of the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Ed Scotus, SANS Fellow, and Jason Blanchard, SANS Pen Test Curriculum Marketing Manager. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Jason.
I am off mute. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We have hundreds of people who are currently listening, and we're about to turn it over to Ed. I'm going to introduce you real quick. Ed, I've gotten a chance to work with him for the last 3 years. This is like my 3-year anniversary with SANS, and when I was first coming to SANS, when I would talk to people in the InfoSec community, and they're like, "You get to work with Ed Scotus?" And I was like, "Yeah, is he something?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "He wrote the book. He wrote it, like the book on hacking." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And over the years, I got to know Ed, and he's incredibly humble, incredibly smart, incredibly good at what he does, and he's taught so many people. And so it's an opportunity. What we're about to hear right now is just tips from Ed, straight from his brain into your brain to help make you a better pen tester. So Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's get started.
Oh, shucks, Jason. Thank you for your kind introduction. That was really, really, really sweet and wonderful. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Thank you for coming out to this webcast. Super excited about this one. Happy New Year. Here we are, 2018. Can you believe it? They keep changing it. Every time I turn around, it's a new year. We want to share with you something pretty darn cool that we just put together over the last couple of months. It's a new SANS Pen Test poster. Oh, and Jason, aren't we going to give posters to the people who are on this webcast?
Absolutely. Everyone. Right? Yep. Everyone who registered will get a form mailed to them as long as we have a valid address. And if your address is not valid, please update it before tomorrow morning so that way we can get that out to you.
Absolutely. That's in your SANS portal. Update your mailing address. So we're going to send you these posters. So the poster's called Blueprint, Building a Better Pen Tester. And I'd like to kind of walk you through the different pieces of this poster, but also it will give you tips on doing penetration testing itself. I've been doing penetration testing myself for, quite a long time, about 25 years. And I've worked with some of the most amazing pen testers in the business. I've learned so much from them. I've also seen a lot of mistakes that pen testers have made. And what we try to do is put this poster together so that it helps every pen tester do things better. I mean, stuff that I've learned over the years from seeing other people who do it just so right, and also stuff that I've seen that has gone horribly awry. So we put together these tips for you so that we can help you be a better pen tester. Now, you might say, "Look, dude, I'm not a pen tester. What do I care?" Well, the fact is you probably have some sort of pen testing in your life. And even if you yourself are not doing pen testing, you have to deal with the aftermath of a pen test. If you're a cybersecurity professional, somebody might conduct a pen test, you got to implement their recommendations. Or you might need to structure a pen test so that it's done well. Your boss might come to you and say, "We got pen testers coming in. How do we do this and do it right?" Right? So even if you're not a pen tester yourself, there's things that you can do to help drive higher quality pen testing. And we tried to capture some of that in this poster. So let me go ahead and move to the next slide. So the poster actually debuted last month. It was December 2017, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the history of the poster. Jason and I have worked together, I think, on 3 posters so far. It's Jason's 3rd anniversary. We do about a poster a year. Mm-hmm. The last poster we did was Command Line Kung Fu, and I'll confess, I had the idea for that poster just to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we gave people a bunch of command line stuff for, PowerShell and Python and Bash and CMD.exe. And Jason's like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And then I had this horrible idea of we just put like little pictures of terminals on the screen and we'd show you the commands in the terminal screen. And I sketched up what I thought it should look like. And Jason was so kind and nice. He didn't tell me how horrible it looked, but he realized that he had to come up with a better way to express these ideas. You remember that, Jason, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yep, and he came up with this idea of the whiteboard. He said to me, "We'll ship everybody a whiteboard." I'm like, "That seems like it's going to break the budget there." He's like, no, it'll be like a paper whiteboard. It'll look like a whiteboard, and there'll be little magnets on it and stuff, and we can hang up Post-it notes and other little notes that has the command line Kung Fu. That was really, really cool. So I came up with the idea of that poster. Jason came up with the implementation of that poster. The reason I'm telling you about that is to show you this one actually went quite differently. Jason came up with the idea for this poster. Jason came to me and he says, hey, what if we did something like, building plans for pen testers so that you could like build a better pen tester, and it could just be a whole bunch of tips and stuff like that on it. I'm like, send me a sketch. I don't know. I couldn't envision it. And he sent me an initial sketch. And then the best part is, over the space of like 3 or 4 weeks, I'd send him a tip every couple of days, just as I was thinking through stuff or working on a pen test or teaching the SANS 560 class or something like that. A new tip would come to mind. And the best part about it, this was pretty easy for me. I just every couple of days sent him a tip or 2 or 3. And Jason put it together. So he had the initial idea for this. I populated it with the various tips. Now, Jason, did you want to tell the folks about where you got the idea for the blueprint thing?
Yeah, so I come from a filmmaking and comic book background, and I was just sitting around with the person who I designed these with, and I was like, hacking is awesome. Like, it really is. Like, I don't get a chance to do it because I'm more of the the computery Photoshop kind of guy. But I see the Net Wars players, I see hackers. My wife's a hacker. I see these people hacking, and I see how much excitement that it is when they break through. And I was like, sometimes hacking, it feels like stealing the blueprints to the Death Star. Like it's the ultimate, like I have this thing that I'm not supposed to have, and I broke through and I got it, and I was like, oh, blueprints, let's make a blueprint. And so that's where this all came from.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the way it came out. See, when SANS does these posters, we want them to be really useful. I mean, practically useful, that you can put into your information security procedures, operations, policies, technology, all that kind of stuff. We want to make them useful, but we also want to make them look nice. We want you to want to hang them up on your wall. In fact, we want you to hang 2 of them up on your wall, one that shows the front and one that shows the back. Here you can see the front and back of our new blueprint poster. And it's got an overview of different topics, different areas you see in there: pre-engagement, recon, and so forth. I'll go through those areas in just a little bit. But this is specific tips that are included in many of the SANS pen test courses, but especially the SANS Security 560 course. That's a course on network penetration testing and ethical hacking. I'm the author of that course, and I teach it regularly. In fact, I'm going to be teaching it first full week of February in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is sounding pretty nice after our ice storm last night in New Jersey. So Scottsdale, Arizona, I think it starts February 5th through 10th. Anyway, so that's the 560 class, and this poster has a lot of stuff from 560 as well as the other SANS pen test classes. On the front, you see we have the tips. That's what's on the left-hand side of the screen here. On the back, and this was all Jason's idea for the back, we have at the very top, rules of engagement and scoping checklist. So if you're putting together a pen test, this is something you could just kind of go through and make sure you covered all of these items in your scope and rules of engagement. But we didn't stop there. Jason kept going. He put a little Nmap cheat sheet on there, a PowerShell cheat sheet, a Scapy cheat sheet, and a Metasploit cheat sheet. And if you think about it, as a pen tester, those 4 things are tremendously useful in what we do in our day-to-day work. And then Jason also put in a nifty little reference for the Slingshot Linux distribution that we use in SANS 560, SANS 504, some of the other different SANS classes. So that's our Linux distro there. And then, of course, you got an overview of the pen test curriculum and what the different courses are all about. So from a high-level overview, you got one side full of tips. The other side, it's got a bunch of really useful cheat sheets, list of the SANS courses, because we've got to pay the bills, and SANS Slingshot Linux image. But let's move forward to the next slide. Now, it's divided into 7 sections. I'm going to focus on these 7 sections and give you practical, real tips for it. It starts with pre-engagement, doing your scope, doing your rules of engagement, just some things in there for you to do that better and get more value in your pen tests. We then move on to the reconnaissance phase, where you're learning about the target organization. We then move into vulnerability analysis. I didn't want to call it just scanning because vul analysis is broader than mere scanning. So we called it vul analysis. Then we get into password attacks on this lower right quadrant. You see we're kind of going around clockwise. Password attacks, there's a lot of tips on that one. Each section has like 6, 7, 8 tips in it. We then get into exploitation, followed by post-exploitation. And yes, we do have to do reporting, and I've got some practical tips for you there in reporting as well. Anyway, we've got all these tips, 5, 6, 7, 8 tips in each one of these 7 different sections. And if you do the math on that, it comes to, Jason, here's your quiz. I told you I would quiz you. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many total tips there are on this poster? Do you?
I think there's 40 something.
Oh my gosh, you don't know! This is awesome. There are you ready? Drum roll, please. 42 tips. Dude, that's like the answer to life, the universe, and everything. I didn't realize there were 42 tips. I would just send you one or two or three a couple of days. There's 42 of them. Is that awesome or what? We should tell everybody we intended to do that. In fact, I thought you might have answered 42 and saying you did it on purpose. Or I should probably say I did it on purpose, but the fact is there's 42. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Is that cool, Jason?
Yeah, I had no idea until just then.
You don't seem very impressed. I was very impressed. All right, next slide. All right, so it begins. The poster begins with a definition of penetration testing, just so we can kind of be clear of what we're talking about. And a penetration test that's not merely focused on, hey, let's just find some flaws and hope for the best, but to really provide high value. So high value penetration testing involves using the techniques of real world attackers. If you're not doing what the real world attackers are doing, you're not providing very much value, right? And you're trying to find vulnerabilities, but you don't stop there. That would just be a vulnerability assessment. Instead, with a penetration test, under controlled circumstances, you're trying to exploit target systems. If you're not exploiting the target machines, or at least you don't have that as a possibility in your scope, you're not really doing a penetration test. Remember, it's called penetration test because you're trying to penetrate into the target organization. So you exploit those flaws. You want to do it, though, in a professional, safe manner. You're not just shooting exploits all over the place, hoping for getting a foothold on something. Instead, you want to follow your scope. You want to follow your rules of engagement. If you do these things and you do them carefully, it will help you to better determine your business risk and manage that business risk better. That's kind of what this is all about. I mean, information security fundamentally is about risk management. And penetration testing, when it's providing its most value, is an aid in managing and understanding risk. So the poster's tips are all focused on that. Let's move on to the next slide. So I'm going to start just with pre-engagement. I'm going to go through 3 or 4 tips from the poster. I can't go through all 42. There just isn't enough time on a single webcast to do it. But you're going to all receive the poster in the mail, and you'll be able to look at all the different tips. I'd like to go through each one of these with you. Start with pre-engagement. When you're first putting together your pen test, you need to talk with target system personnel about what is particularly sensitive in the targeted environment. Maybe it's personal identifiable information, PII. Maybe it's some other sensitive information. It could be maybe medical history, stock trades, financial reports. What are the crown jewels of the organization? But then here's the important concept. You want to know what those are so that you can measure whether you can get access to them, whether they're at business risk. But here's the deal. You don't want to access them. Last thing you want as a pen tester is to download 47 million credit cards from a target environment, because then your machine now has all that critical data on it. And, you know, what if you get hacked? What if that gets exposed? You know, if you look at the payment card industry, the PCI, Data Security Standards, PCI DSS, they talk about how you're supposed to have PCI audits done of machines that store or process credit cards. Now, if you're a pen tester and you are in the habit of downloading the credit cards that you're trying to measure whether you have access to, and you download them to your laptop, does that mean your laptop now needs to have a PCI DSS audit? Well, because of that, I recommend you don't download that stuff. Instead, you're measuring access to it. One way to do that, there's many, but one way to do that is to have the target organization create sample records. So you're not downloading 27 million credit cards. You're just looking to see if you can get the sample record that they created in the target organization. They're essentially creating a flag, and you're trying to capture that flag. By capturing that flag, though, it will show that you have the kind of access that would be needed to get all 47 million credit cards. You see, this is a way to do it in a safer fashion, but still to measure accurately the business risk. Let's move to the next slide. More pre-engagement stuff. This one's kind of a bummer, but you need to do it. You have to get written permission from the owners and operators of the systems you're going to pen test. For a given organization, this is usually pretty straightforward if they own and operate all of their own stuff. But oftentimes, there are third parties involved. It could be a managed security service provider. It could be a cloud provider, so they've got some of their stuff on the cloud. Their routers might be owned by their ISPs. It could be a shared hosting environment. It could be they've outsourced their DNS servers, their mail servers. Heck, they might even have desktops that they've outsourced the management and maybe even ownership of those desktops. So you have to get permission from whomever owns and operates the equipment that you're pen testing. This is vitally important. It can be kind of a pain in the neck to make sure you get permission from every last person, but it is something that is important and you need to do. Otherwise, you get in trouble because you're hacking systems without appropriate authorization. What I like to do is to have a simple one-page memo that gives me permission to do the penetration test from each of these various entities. And then I take that memo, get it signed by the given target entity, and then I keep that signed memo with the report. It's actually included in the appendix of the report. So I've got this whole package that shows the whole deal. Let's go on to our next pre-engagement tip. Practice, 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 practice. You need to keep your skills fresh by participating in capture the flag competitions. There are many out there. There's some wonderful ones. In our last couple of SANS pen test posters, we gave you a list of all these different free capture the flag games you can go to. But you know, one that comes to mind is the SANS Holiday Hack Challenge. Every year, my team spends over 1,000 hours working as hard as we can to put together the really best challenges we can, the best that we know how, and we release it to the world for free. Right now, the Holiday Hack Challenge is still running. We started it about December 15th, I think it was, and it runs as a competition through January 10th, which, consulting my calendar, that means tomorrow. So all answers are due tomorrow, but here's the deal. We keep this thing up year-round. So you can play 2017 Holiday Hack Challenge in March if you want. Now, you can't win. You got to get your answers in by January 10th to win. But you could play the 2015 version, the 2010 version. We keep them all online for you to practice, practice, practice. So that's SANS Holiday Hack. I do hope you'll check it out. This one is quite interesting and fun. Somebody's trying to destroy the North Pole. By the way, I've been working since September on 2018 Holiday Hack Challenge. We've got the storyline coming together and some of the artistry is underway for that. Additionally, you see this Aman Hardikar URL on the page here. This is a mind map that Aman Hardikar put together and released to the world. And it's a place where you can go and download images for practicing your pen testing, or a lot of it has hack this website kind of stuff on it. So you could go and play in various CTFs. They're all here at this practice.html URL. And I'm so thankful to Aman for releasing that to the world and keeping it up to date. In fact, he seems to do updates every time we ask him to give us stuff for a new poster, which I love. He's a great guy. All right, next, reconnaissance. Okay, so we're moving now from pre-engagement into reconnaissance. When you're doing reconnaissance, it can be quite exciting as you're pulling stuff from different servers. You know, you're doing recon. You're interacting with public-facing servers of the target organization, but also, you know, different things that they might have put in, you know, various registries and registrars, like who is registrars, DNS. You're pulling all this stuff in recon. But here is a little tip for you. You need to carefully consider the interactions you're having with target servers that don't belong to the target organization. Right? I mean, if you're going to who is servers, or if you're doing, say, searches in your favorite search engine, or you're interacting with, say, databases of stolen credentials, and you're doing lookups for maybe the target organization's name or email addresses there, you got to be real careful with that, because you might be violating your non-disclosure agreement with the target organization. You, the pen tester, maybe you're an in-house pen tester, you work for that company, you've got a non-disclosure agreement that binds you to not divulging sensitive information about that organization. But if you then start doing reconnaissance, and in the process of doing reconnaissance, you start loading sensitive information into these servers to do queries, you got a problem there. I mean, one of the most blatant ones, and I hope you wouldn't do this, is to take a hash from say a Windows box, maybe it's a landman hash or an NT hash that you dumped, and to do a Google search on that, because you are now revealing to Google the hashes of the target organization. Now you might say, well, Google knows everything about anybody anyway. Yeah, but it's probably bad form to do it. Also, your browser cache will now have that hash in it. Google, whatever it's doing for caching, will have the hash in it. And then if you click on that link, say you do a Google search for a hash, and it finds it, it has a hit. So many people have put so many full lists of landman and some selection of NT hashes online that you will get hits if you do Google searches on hashes. But if you click on that link in Google and then go to that website, you're now telling that website that somebody from your IP address has an interest in this hash and the associated password. You got to be careful. I'm not saying you shouldn't do reconnaissance. I'm not saying you shouldn't interact with third-party servers. I am saying you should do it with thought and be careful about not leaking information that you shouldn't be leaking. You may want to consider using the Tor network for anonymous browsing so that at least they can't tie your IP address to the given target organization that you're researching. So be careful, just be thoughtful. That's what we're talking about with that tip. Next tip, still in reconnaissance. Here it is, double check the IP addresses that you're given for your target environment. You don't want to just blindly trust it. You know, say you're doing a penetration test for one of the business units in your organization, and they say, oh, here's the IP addresses we have. And, you know, maybe they're geographically far away from you and such, and you're like, okay, they say this is the IP address range that they've been assigned by their ISP or whatever. We'll just attack them. What if they screwed up on the IP address? What if they gave you the wrong IP address? Well, that's their fault. Shouldn't they pay the penalty for that? Well, look, here's the deal. It would be their fault, surely, but it's also partially your fault because you have a responsibility to exercise your due diligence, to vet the IP addresses that are given you as a pen tester. Look, this one has bitten me before. I've years and years and years ago, one of the guys on my team did a pen test, and he had the IP addresses wrong, and he successfully got shell on something that wasn't our target organization. This is not a happy thing to do. Can you imagine how that must feel? You get your shell, you know, you work real hard, you get your shell, you're on this box, you start looking around on the machine, you're like, crap, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm not allowed to be here. I mean, you were exhilarated and so happy, and then suddenly you're in the wrong place. So you got to call your lawyer. But the better way to do this is to double check in advance. Do whois searches to vet the IP addresses that they give you to make sure that they belong to them. And also you could use traceroute. The idea of this traceroute tip here is that if there's a, say, server that I know belongs to them, because if I surf to its web page, it says that it's their company, I could then trace route to that, and I'll see the various series of router hops on my way there. And if I see other target machines that have the same last router hop, or maybe the last 2 or 3 router hops are in common, that's a sign that they're all kind of close together, and therefore they're more likely to be in scope. So use things like whois lookups and traceroute to vet the IP addresses that you're given to make sure they're in scope. Really important. You don't want to get bit by this one. Next, we're going to move on to some tips associated with vulnerability analysis. I really, really like this next tip. Now, some people, when they first hear it, they're like, yeah, whatever. But this is money, folks. This is golden. I've been doing this since I started pen testing years and years and years ago. When you're doing your pen test, regardless of the phase that you're in, maybe it's vulnerability analysis, so you're doing your scanning, or even when it's exploitation or post-exploitation, run a sniffer. Run a sniffer to display all the packets going from your pen test machine to the target environment. And just at least display them on the screen. I'm not saying you have to capture them into a file necessarily, but display them on the screen. Why? Because it lets you verify that your tool is working as you expect. Like say you start running an Nmap scan, and it's going to be running for several hours or maybe even multiple days. I want a sniffer running showing me all those packets that Nmap is generating, so that way if Nmap like seizes up or crashes or something like that, maybe I won't notice it in the Nmap screen itself because it just hangs, but instead I'll see the sniffer showing no traffic's going out. I can also kind of gaze into the TCP dump window and say, these source and destination IP addresses, they look reasonable. I can see what my tool is doing. Also, when you get into exploitation, if you're using a tool like Metasploit or maybe Metasploit Pro or Core Impact or whatever it happens to be, I want to run a sniffer so that I can see the exploitation as it's happening. It'll make you a better pen tester because you'll understand what your tools are doing better. And if they start going wrong, if they start doing things that you don't expect, you'll have more of a chance of seeing that in the sniffer output itself. Now, one thing that made me so happy, I'm not going to name the person because I don't want to embarrass him, but there is a hacker who is incredible, amazing, amazing person. He's been doing pen testing for many years, and you know, he presents at a lot of the hacker conferences. And I was at DerbyCon. Jason was there, a bunch of us were there, and this person, whom I respect immensely and has been doing pen testing for quite a long time, he pulled me aside. He said, hey, Ed, I took your 560 class a couple months ago. Not from you, but I took it from another SANS instructor, and he nailed it. He did a great job. I said, oh, that's wonderful to hear. I'm real happy to hear that. He says, but dude, I've been pen testing for like a decade, and there's just one tip that you put in the 560 course that I never thought about. I'm like, what are you talking about? What tip? He's like, it's just to run TCP dump while you're running your tools. I'm like, yeah. He said, I just started doing that, you know, after I took the class. This is awesome. I love it. He said, simple concept, just run a sniffer. But he said, I'm understanding my tools better. I'm seeing where they're failing better. I'm getting ideas of how to improve the tools just by looking at the packets that the tools are generating. I was elated when this guy pulled me aside and told me that. It made me so happy. I wanted to hug him, but I thought that would be kind of awkward, so I shook his hand. All right, so now you might say, why not Wireshark? Look, I just like TCP dump because it's really fast and I can just display it on a screen, with a command line. I don't even need a terminal. There is T-Shark, which is a terminal-oriented Wireshark. That's fine. If you really want to use T-Shark or Wireshark, you can. I like TCP dump because it's fast, it's quick, it's cheap, it's free, it's built into a lot of things. So that's the one I like to go to for this initial overview cursory analysis. If I want to start digging into the packets deeply, I'll use TCP dump to make a packet capture, and then I'll use Wireshark to do the detailed analysis. You see? So I use TCP dump as sort of my capturing tool and just sort of summary display tool. And then Wireshark is the thing that really pulls things apart for me. Nice. All right, so more tips on vulnerability analysis. If you find a vulnerability, especially one that is high risk or even critical risk, you need to do false positive reduction before you report that as a high or critical risk. So you should research how to verify a given finding by using some other technique, like maybe a simple bash script or a PowerShell script, or maybe there's something that somebody's written for the Nmap scripting engine or some other way. I am very uncomfortable reporting on a high risk or critical finding if I haven't checked that finding through some other mechanism. So say I run a vulnerability scanner like Nessus or Nexpose or something like that. I run one of those vulnerability scanners. It gives me say a high risk finding. Before I'm going to report on that, I want to verify either by running some other tool or better yet, by having some script that will check it for me. Really important. Because otherwise you start reporting on false positives, target organization will not believe in the veracity of the rest of your report, right? Next tip in vulnerability analysis. Oh, this is kind of an important one. So you scan target organization, right? Maybe on an intranet pen test or something like that, and you find TCP port 445 open on some target systems. TCP 445, that's a server message block. It's used for Windows file and printer sharing. Yeah, so therefore it must be a Windows machine, right? Most likely, 90-some% of the time. I was reviewing a pen test report a couple of years ago that was written by a pretty good pen tester, and he assumed that all the TCP 445s were Windows boxes. This is not necessarily the case. It could be a Samba daemon or some other SMB-based target system. It might be some sort of storage area network or network attached storage or something like that that actually has Linux or some other operating system at its core. My point here is when you see TCP 445 open on a target box, it's probably Windows, but don't assume it is Windows. It might be something else. In fact, it might be something else very interesting like NAS, network attached storage. Really, really cool stuff. But this guy, he wrote up his report, and when he assumed that everything 445 was SMB and therefore Windows, there was some stuff in there that wasn't Windows, and it was in fact the NAS systems of the target organization, and it was embarrassing for us to have turned in a report that made that incorrect assumption. So I thought that'd be a good tip to share with you guys. Next, we're going to get into password attacks. Everybody loves password attacks, right? First tip, create a word list that is fine-tuned to your target organization. I mean, yeah, there's word lists out there. There's like RockU, the word list with over 1 million words in it. And there's all these different word lists you can get, and they're fine. They're good. They're useful. But you could create one that is tuned to the target organization, that is based on the people that are there, the products that they have. It'll go a lot further for you. And you can generate this kind of stuff using some command line kung fu that we show you in the SANS 560 course. Or there's a great tool called Cool, C-E-W-L. It's a custom word list generator. It was created by Robin Wood. Many of you know him. He goes by the handle DigiNinja. Really, really good guy. In fact, I got a meeting coming up with Robin in a couple of weeks. But anyway, his Cool tool is literally cool. C-E-W-L, custom word list generator. Next slide, password attacks. Oh, create a word list fine-tuned not just for the organization by crawling its website, but also fine-tuned for users within the organization by looking at their social networking profiles. We've done penetration tests where we've gotten access to 2 million credit cards. We haven't downloaded the credit cards, but we've gotten access to them by simply doing password guessing from the words we got from the social networking profiles, primarily Facebook and LinkedIn. Boom, there you go. Very nice, very helpful. So custom word lists based on their website and based on the social networking profiles. Next tip. Ooh, this one's a good one. You see, when you're doing password cracking, your password cracking tool is probably doing some form of word mangling. That is, your dictionary might have the word, just for an example, the word password in it. But if you use a tool like John the Ripper or one of the other password mangling tools, Hashcat does this as well. They'll take the word password from the dictionary and try it, and it doesn't work. And then they'll try password 12 and password 13 and password 14 and 12 password. Someone will even start shaving off the letters. So they'll do PASSWOR without the D. P@ SSW0RD. This is known as word mangling. Now here's the deal. You get some hashes in one of your pen tests and you start running a password cracker. And let's say it works its way through the dictionary and starts mangling the words, and boom, it cracks one successfully. A word mangle. Maybe it's able to successfully crack, I don't know, P@55W0RD123. My advice to you is to take that one that you just cracked, so it's post-mangled, take that and add it to your dictionary. So that way, if you ever encounter that same password again in that pen test, but in a different hash format, you won't have to go through the mangling routine again. You see what I'm saying? Really, really important. So maybe you'll find some NT hashes, right? From a Windows machine. You get your NT hashes, you crack them, great. It went through all its word mangling, fantastic. But what if you ever, in that same pen test, get into a Linux box and you've got, I don't know, say salted SHA-512 hashes, but it's the same password. If you have to mangle that whole thing again, salted SHA-512 is doing 5,000 rounds of SHA, and it's going to take a long time to do that for each potential guess. Instead, you've got it already there. You've already mangled your way to it. So just put it in your dictionary so you'll be able to get it more quickly. All right, really, really useful. Next slide. Additional password attacks. Sometimes people, when they think about password attacks, they get kind of obsessed with password cracking because it's fun and interesting. And hey, I just want to throw some CPU or even GPU at this thing. Awesome. Or maybe they think of password guessing. You got to be careful with account lockout. And we've got some tips associated with account lockout. But they overlook other ways to get passwords. Sniffing. I love to sniff, especially if there's clear text passwords going across the network. Or automated keystroke logging. Metasploit's Interpreter has a keystroke logger built into it. You might as well activate it and see if you get some good keystrokes. Really, really useful stuff. Don't obsess with just password guessing and password cracking. Think about other ways to get passwords, such as sniffing and keystroke logging. Really, really useful. All right, now let's move into the exploitation phase. Now, sometimes when you're moving your way into the exploitation phase, you're actually creating a payload that you want to execute on the target box. And there's a variety of different ways to get code execution on that target machine. But you often, if you're trying to trick a user into running something, you're often going to have to evade their antivirus tool. And we have a bunch of advice in the SANS Security 560 course on antivirus evasion, do's and don'ts of that. But one of the don'ts is when you create your payload that you want to run on the user system and evade their antivirus tool, don't take that payload and load it up to virustotal.com. Why? Because you're shooting yourself in the foot. Virustotal.com collaborates with the antivirus vendors. So what some people who don't realize this might do is they create their payload. They want to make sure it'll evade all the antivirus tools. So they upload it into virustotal.com. Ooh, of the 56 ones, it evades, 49 of them. That's pretty good. And then they'll use it. And it might work today, but tomorrow it won't work again. Or certainly not the next day, because VirusTotal will share all those samples with all the antivirus companies. So today it evades 49 of them. Tomorrow, 42, it's a good number, then 30, and then 20. And there's usually like 12 it'll always evade anyway. But the point here is, instead of using virustotal.com as your checker to see if you're evading antivirus tools, your best bet is to get the same version of antivirus that the target organization has. Install that on one of your own machines, and then work diligently to evade that. That's how we do it in the SANS Security 560 course, and it works darn well. Additional tips for exploitation. When I'm doing an exploitation, like especially of a network service that I'm trying to get into, maybe there's like an unpatched service or something like that that can give me code execution, remote code execution of a listening service. It can be a beautiful thing, but there's always a chance that you might crash something. So that's why I like to run a command or even a simple little script that will check the service every second just to make sure it stays up while I'm exploiting it. And if it goes down, my little one-line script will say, hey, the service has gone down. So that way I find out right away. And then I can work with target system personnel to get it restarted. We do this in SANS Security 560. We've got these little command line kung fu one-liners that are just little bash one-lines that will check to make sure a given service is still there. So you can certainly do that. Exploitation. Oh, when you create your payloads during the exploitation phase and you deliver them, you want to create them in such a way that they'll be able to phone home to you. It's really important. Usually use some sort of reverse shell. Why? Because If you have like a listening shell on a port and you get it inside the organization, you might not be able to communicate with that port because the firewalls are blocking it. It might be a network-based firewall, even a local firewall on the box that you've exploited might be blocking a listening port. But most of the time they allow outbound connections back out, especially through protocols like HTTPS. So the tip here is to use a payload that mimics what the bad guys would do. And that is, it will run on the target machine, phone back home to you using a protocol like HTTPS. PowerShell Empire does that. Metasploit has some great payloads that do that. The Veil framework creates tools that do that. Or, as long as the target machine can resolve names via DNS, you could use a tool like DNSCat. DNSCat was created by Ron Bowes. That's B-O-W-E-S. Ron is a member of my team, actually. Started working for us at CounterHack about 3 months ago. And he worked very hard on the Holiday Hack Challenge, by the way. So anyway, that's another tip for you there. One more tip on the exploitation side. To lower the chance of crashing a Windows machine, my advice to you is this. If you have SMB access to that Windows box, TCP 445 kind of stuff, and you have an admin username and password, maybe you've gotten that from someplace else in the target organization, don't exploit some listening service that, via buffer overflow or format string flaw or some other flaw that might crash it. Instead, use PSExec or some similar Windows features like WMIC or the SC command or some other mechanism, PowerShell remoting, that you can use to cause it to run your payload. So the point here is, don't risk crashing a Windows machine by exploiting some buffer overflow flaw kind of thing if you already have the kind of access you need to make it run arbitrary code via PSExec, via WMIC, or via some other mechanism. Oh, I do have one more exploitation one for you. This one's really important, and it comes up in the SANS 560 class all the time. If your exploit fails, like say you're in Metasploit and you run it and then it just doesn't work, you don't get your shell, look at the output of what your tool is telling you. Metasploit actually has some really, really good output and error messages in it. So do a lot of the other tools as well. Read that output. Students, sometimes they'll take the class from me and they're working on doing some sort of exploit or something like that, and it doesn't work. And they call me over and they say, what happened? And I look at the screen and it actually says on the screen exactly what happened. Authentication failure, or it got a reset from the target box. Plus, remember, you're also running a sniffer here too. So you got your sniffer going, you can see what's happening from the packet perspective, and then your tool itself is telling you what's going on. And oftentimes what's happening in Metasploit is that your stager works. Your stager is the thing that's getting code to the target box and causing it to execute. The code that you're getting there is your stage, but the stage might be failing. And you'll see that the stager gets loaded and everything's going, then it loads the stage and then suddenly it doesn't work anymore. Most likely the stage is being blocked by antivirus or some other code limitation on the target box. So read the output from your tools. I know it sounds like an obvious tip. Well, of course I'm going to read the output from my tools. I see a lot of pen testers that don't. It didn't work. I don't know why it didn't work. The fact is, read these tools. They have really good, useful output. And then we're going to move into post-exploitation. A little bit of advice for you here. When you get into a Windows box, so you're on a Windows box, maybe it's a client, maybe it's a server, I don't care, whatever it is. When you're on that box, look for established connections to other machines on TCP 445 or TCP 3389. As you know, TCP 445 is SMB. That means somebody has probably mounted a file share or is doing some sort of authentication across that. If you're on a client, when you run a command like netstat-na, pipe through find, I'm looking for the string EST for established connections. Pipe through find, I'm looking for the string 445. So I've got established connections, go to TCP 445. If I'm on a client, those connections are likely going to a file server, maybe even a domain controller. Or maybe there's some other client that has mounted a share there. Could be. If I'm on a server, you'll see incoming clients to that box. That's quite interesting and cool. And I can do the same kind of thing for TCP 3389, which is remote desktop protocol. Again, a beautiful thing. If I get into a client and I see it's got a 3389 connection to another box, it's probably running an RDP client to get GUI access to that other machine. This is sweetness. I like it. Next, post-exploitation. Oh, this is a really good tip. I've actually heard this tip from many different people. In fact, we were at SANS Pentest Hackfest, I want to say last year. It was actually 2016, and we had a little panel of advice when you're doing pen testing. And Tom Liston, my good buddy Tom, opened up with this one. Tom said, you can tell a rookie pen tester, Because as soon as they get on a box, they start scanning the crap out of everything else. And that's really loud and it gets them noticed. And it's not what real world attackers would typically do. Instead, when you first get into a machine, your best bet is to look at that machine's own knowledge of the networked world around it before you start scanning. So you could do things like, if you're on a Windows box, do ipconfig/display DNS. What a great command. I love it. What this command will do is it will dump the operating system level DNS cache. So you can see all of the names that have been recently resolved on that machine. It will even show you the DNS time to live and how many seconds remain in that. If you run this command every second, you'll see the TTLs going down by 1 every second. So that's cool. Those are the IP addresses and domain names that machine is recently resolved. You can also do an ARP-A on Windows or Linux. It'll show you the ARP cache. So you can see the machines on the same subnet with which that machine that you've conquered has communicated with in the last 10 minutes or so. Stuff usually lives in an ARP cache about 10 minutes. That's cool. You also want to look at established TCP connections. I mean, the previous tip, I was showing you how you can look for connections to 445 or 3389, but if you just want to see all TCP activity, just do a netstat-NA. It can also be useful to look at the routing table with a netstat-NR because, well, you can see the other networks that this machine knows about that it's learned from routing. Pretty nifty stuff. And notice that I'm not scanning. And if you look at this netstat-NA, if there's any established connections going to other machines, I can infer those ports are open on those other machines because how did those connections get established if those ports are closed, right? So you don't have to do a port scan. Get in one box. You could find some open ports on other machines as long as there's existing established connections. Really useful. Next slide, post-exploitation. Oh, here's one. I sometimes hear pen testers say, oh, I got into this box and I was so excited, but I tried to do privilege escalation and I couldn't. So I'm kind of stuck. Dude, look, I like privilege escalation as much as the next guy. I want to have root. I want to have, admin. I want to have local system privileges. I want to have UID 0, whatever. I want that. But if you can't get that, you can still do a whole lot of stuff, right? You could determine the installed software on the box. You might be able to find some vulnerable software. You could pivot through the machine. You can get a list of users. You might not be able to get hashes. Usually to dump the hashes, you got to have, super user privileges, admin or UID 0 or something like that. But you could still do a lot of stuff. Don't think that the fact that you don't have root or admin or system on a target box it has ruined your pen test. No. You have done well. You've gotten as far as you can. What is that old saying from the Rolling Stones? You can't always get what you want, which of course you want, UID 0 or system. But if you try sometime, you just might find you get what you need. All right? Ed Scott is quoting Mick Jagger. Who would have thought? But the point here is you don't get root. All right. You still have access to that box and you can use its place on the network to pivot and start attacking other machines. Awesomeness. And then finally, we get to everybody's favorite topic, which is reporting, right? Isn't that your favorite topic? Well, maybe not. It's not my favorite topic either. People ask me, they say, do you like writing pen test reports? And my answer is always, I like having written them. I like it when I'm done with a report. And if I'm happy with the report, it makes me very happy. But when I'm working on a report, I'm no happier than the average person is working on it. But here's the deal. My advice to you, this big tip, don't wait for the end of the pen test to start writing the report. In fact, set yourself up so that you're going to write a bit of that report every day. I like to say I'd like to write 2 or 3 pages of the report every single day while the pen test is happening. Because not only will this make your report better, it will actually make your pen test better. Have you ever done a pen test where maybe you got like a 2-week span to do the pen test and you spend, I don't know, the first 3/4 of it, maybe a little bit less, maybe for 60% of it doing the actual pen test, and then the last 40% writing the report? Doesn't that last 40% stink? I hate that. But instead, what you're doing is you're now moving the reporting so it becomes something that you do naturally throughout the pen test. I tell you, in the olden days, I used to do it where I would write the report and I'd just have that phase right at the end and I always just write the report. And what I'd notice is while I was writing the report, I'd see something that I didn't observe when I was doing the actual test itself the week before. Crap, the testing window is closed. I'm in reporting. I can't go back and follow up on this interesting lead I discovered. So therefore, my pen tests were actually lower quality. But if I'm writing the report, I have a better chance of noticing that stuff while I'm doing the pen test and writing the report at the same time. So you're going to get a better report. Your pen test itself will be better. And frankly, you will live a happier pen tester life if you do it this way. Because who wants to just do reporting? Next, in reporting, please do include screenshots in your report. I mean, they help make it more real, more visceral. They help make it easier to read. And you should annotate your screenshots with arrows, put circles in there. When I'm reviewing pen test reports, I never want to see one that just shows a screenshot and says, see, the system's vulnerable. Look at the screenshot. Well, what am I supposed to look at in the screenshot? How am I knowing that it's vulnerable? Circle something. Put an arrow in there. Draw the reader's attention. It'll make your report pop and so much better. Next tip. Oh, you got to write to the proper audience in the proper sections. Your executive summary should be written so that it's meant to be read by people who are making decisions about business risk and allocating resources. That's what that part's about. You don't get into technical depth in the executive summary. No, instead that's done in the findings. The findings should be written from a technical perspective, but they should be informed by your understanding of the business. And then your recommendations should take into account the operations personnel. You know, you're writing these recommendations for how to improve their security stance, but if your recommendations aren't operationalizable, is that a word? Operationalizable? If the operations team can't take action on your recommendations, they are useless. You need to think about it from an operations perspective. Now you might say, I've had people say this to me, Ed, I'm a pen tester. I'm an offensive guy, right? Or they'll say, I'm a red teamer. I don't know blue team operations, defensive operations. I don't know that. And my response is, we should. I mean, to be a really good pen tester, you need to know how to operationalize around your recommendations so that they can improve their security stance. That's why red exists when we do red teaming. It's to help make blue better. So you need to become more informed. Don't use that as a crutch to say, I'm offensive, I'm red, I don't need to know defense. No, you need to know defense for two reasons. One is so you can help improve defenses. And the second is so you can get around the defenses, right? So you got to build that knowledge. Okay, so those were the tips. There's 42 total. I just went through 20 something of them. But there's some additional stuff included in this poster. We got a scoping checklist. As you're formulating your scope for a pen test, I just in fact did this yesterday for a pen test that's coming up, and I got another one of these coming up next week. It's just scoping calls. Yes, the target organization, what their biggest security concern is. Are you performing against live production environment or is it a test environment? What are the third parties? Remember we had tips about the third parties that own or operate systems. So we got the scoping checklist in there for you. Here's another piece of it. There's a rules of engagement checklist included in the poster. All kinds of great stuff. Here's the rules of engagement checklist. You know, getting contact information, doing a briefing on a regular basis. Are they going to be shunning your IP addresses? I was so happy when Jason included these checklists on the back side of the poster. So we've got the cheat sheets included on the back side of the poster too. There's the Nmap cheat sheet, the PowerShell cheat sheet, the Scapy cheat sheet, the Metasploit cheat sheet, a description of the SANS Slingshot Linux distribution, and an overview of the whole pentest curriculum. There's a lot. I'm really happy with the way this poster came out, and I'm not tooting my own horn because the fact is it was Jason Blanchard's idea, and there is so much actionable, useful stuff in this darn poster. I've got one sitting here right next to my desk. It is really, really cool, all the stuff, the Nmap, PowerShell, Scapy, and Metasploit cheat sheets, directly usable. Nice. So I'd like to kind of conclude this and then maybe open it up for questions and answers with Jason. So yep. Penetration testing is really a growing information security field. There's so much going on in pen testing. It is exciting. And there's a lot of different ways for you to provide really good high-value penetration testing. We tried to capture some of those ways with our 42 tips, but also we've got 4 cheat sheets that are included on this poster as well. And I think we're going to send them 4 copies of the poster as a thank you for joining us on this webcast. We really do appreciate your time. And with that, I'd like to open it up for Jason to kind of read some of the questions or anything else you want to add, Jason. You ready?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of questions about the Slingshot Linux distro, where it's available, how people can get it, and I know it's not available publicly, but Ed, would you like to address that?
Sure. So we do distribute the SANS Slingshot image with the SANS 560 course and the SANS 504 course. We are working toward making it a freely downloadable image, but it's probably going to be about 5 months off. So that would put us toward the end of second quarter. But we are working on it. We want to get this in your hands. We want to help you, but we want to do it in a really solid way. We want to do it so that it just plain works for you. And that's what we're working on. So give us about 5 months.
Eva asked a few questions. We weren't able to address all of them, but one is, would you include previously accepted risk in your report or leave them out at the organization's request?
Would I include previously accepted risk in the report or leave them out? I would like to include them, just because I don't want them to fall between the cracks. I don't want anybody to forget about them. If I've discovered a security issue in your organization in doing my work, I owe that to you. And you can again say, we have accepted that one already, and we accept it again. Great. I've done my job in identifying your risks, because that's what you paid me to do. And you have done your job in making business decisions about those risks. I respect your decisions. I mean, they're running a business as best they know. But I would rather include them. Why? Because if they end up getting hacked that way, I don't want my last pen test report to not include it, right? Because then I look bad. So for me, it's kind of a defensive mechanism, but I also think it's me just providing the business value they're paying me for. That's a really good question, Eva. Thank you.
Yep. Another one is there ways that when you're pen testing that you can avoid detection of installed SIEM apps?
There is a great webcast series by John Strand and his team at Black Hills Information Security. It's called Tipping Sacred Cows. And what they do, and there's another one coming up, I think it's either this week or next week. They've been doing these for several years, but it's all about evading some sort of detection tool in the target environment. And they just slice them apart. Some of them are antivirus, some of them are application whitelisting, some of them are network-based, some are this. They call it tipping sacred cows. Now, one of the jokes I always tell about that is, what do you tip a sacred cow? 15%? But anyway, I do recommend you check out the Tipping Sacred Cows webcast from Black Hills Information Security. John Strand and his team do a marvelous job with them. And they just choose a different set of vendor tools to evade. And they do them every, 3 or 6 months for a few years.
Thanks, Ed. Another question from Leon. How close is the poster to the pen test execution standard?
How close is the poster to the pen test execution standard? The pen test execution standard is enormous. It is wonderful. It's really good. I mean, I'd like to think that they're written in the same spirit. But the posters is a single poster with 42 tips on it. If you look at the Pen Test Execution Standard, PTES, by Chris Nickerson and a whole bunch of other folks, it is enormous. There's so much stuff in it. So there's nothing contradictory in them. But the Pen Test Execution Standard has more if you want to read all of that stuff. You can almost think about, some of the most directly applicable tips from Pen Test Execution Standard are represented in a poster. So one is a subset of the other. Neither supplants the other one, though.
Thanks, Ed. I think this is a question a lot of people are going to have and they haven't asked yet, is any advice for moving from a blue team job to a red team ethical hacking pen test type job?
Yes. Oh, really good. So I wrote an article several years ago called "So You Want to Be a Pen Tester." Okay. Now, if you Google that term, "So You Want to Be a Pen Tester," you will find that there are 2 articles that are written with that name. I wrote the first one, and then my good friend Vinny Liu wrote the second one. He didn't know I had written the first one. Both of them are good articles. I recommend you read both of them. But I will tell you a summary of my article. What it says is, okay, so you want to be a pen tester, you want to be a red teamer. My advice to you is to start moving in that direction within your own existing company. You're on the cybersecurity team, you're doing defensive kind of stuff. That's great. Next time you get a pen test done by your in-house pen testers, offer to help them. Or next time you get a third-party pen tester, try to set it up in such a way that you can ride shotgun and look over their shoulder. Also, start practicing. Practice. There's the Aman Hardikar stuff. There's the Holiday Hack Challenge stuff. Start practicing and building your skills. So it's to gradually start moving yourself in that direction just by offering help there. There's a guy, Derek Rook, a really, really good guy. He's done some presentations at the SANS Pen Test Hack Fest in November over the last 2 years about how he's kind of purposely moved his career in that direction. Blue through and through, doing all the defensive stuff, but then he started doing more help of the offensive things that were happening inside his organization, and suddenly finds himself on a red team. So it's to gradually start moving there. The other way to do it, and I cover this in the article as well, is to actually set up, and this is dangerous, you got to be careful, you got to do it right, but to set up your own little pen test company on the side. Probably starting, maybe not doing pen testing, but even just simple vulnerability assessment, where you'll do vuln scanning of like the local, florist or a motorist garage or something like that. You got to get insurance though, because if you start breaking stuff, you don't want them to be able to come after you. But that's another route that some people go. They take a class. In fact, I had a guy who just took my class back in November. He took the SANS 560 class, and he had a company that does cyber defense stuff. It's his own company that he owns, and he wanted to start doing pen testing as part of that company. And he came up to me during one of the breaks and said, what do I need to do? And I told him about the article that he should read. And then I said, you got to get yourself some insurance that covers pen testing stuff. It's the insurance, depending on how you view it. It used to be fairly cheap, $2,000 or $3,000. I just renewed mine, and it was like $9,000. It's getting more expensive because there's more concerns about a pen tester maybe hacking in and getting credit cards and then getting hacked there. So there's more liability pushback on the insurance company. So they're charging more for the insurance. That's why you want to have a strict policy to say, we don't download those credit cards, right? So good question. Thank you. Again, it's called So You Want to Be a Pen Tester. That's the article I wrote, as well as the article that Vinny Liu wrote.
We posted the link in the chat window. So if anyone wanted.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Did you put the one for Vinny's article in there too? Was that easy to find? I don't know.
I did not find that one yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you, man.
Another question is, suppose you want to pen test something hosted in the cloud, such as AWS, Google, or Azure. Yep. Do they even talk to people who are, let's say, not the biggest pen testers on the block?
Well, it depends. Amazon is actually really quite good with this. There's a form at Amazon that you can go to, and you can fill out the form, and you say, I want to do a pen test, and here's what it is, and here's the techniques I want to use, and then within 24 hours, they'll get back to you and give you permission or not. And they've been very good at giving permission, as long as what you're proposing to do is not going to hurt any other tenant. So you'll be able to test that one given tenant of the Amazon infrastructure. So Amazon's quite amicable to that kind of stuff. Some of the other ones are more or less. I've seen Amazon be the most friendly there. But Google Compute, Azure, they all have similar kinds of things, but Amazon's the friendliest.
We have 3 final questions, and I'll go in this order. It's a follow-up to the insurance question. Recommendation for sources for getting insurance. I don't have like a specific source for you, but if you're really interested in this, email me, because I'll hook you up with my insurance broker. I've worked with him for 15 years. His name is Anthony Bruscia. He knows exactly the kind of insurance I need, so I don't have to think about it that much. He makes money on it, but he gets me the best deal he can. He's a broker, so he's not tied into a particular insurance firm. So sometimes he'll shop around for me. I say, Anthony, you're killing me. You got to cut back on that a little bit. And he'll go and try to find something a little more focused. So if you really want to know, I will hook you up with Anthony. Just shoot me some email. ed@counterhack.com. All right. This one's a little self-serving, but Jason asked it. Not me, Jason, but actually Jason asked it. What do you consider the next best applicable course after completing 560?
It depends on where you want to go with your career and your work. So 560 is network penetration testing and ethical hacking. So it tells you, what you need to do from a methodology and tool and understanding perspective to do a really solid value penetration test, network pen test, getting into clients and servers and that kind of stuff. From that point forward, if you want to get deeper into that, if you want to get into more Windows domain attacks, if you want to get more into VLAN hopping, if you want to get into exploit creation and development, if you want to just get deeper there, we've got the SANS 660 course, and there's a cert associated with that called GXPN. If you want to go even deeper, we have the 760 course, which is like Windows kernel exploitation, Linux heap exploitation, all that kind of stuff. So we've got that series 560, 660, 760. Oh, by the way, we are debuting this week a brand new course called 460. 460 is a 400 level course that's focused on vulnerability assessment. So you're not getting shell on the targets, but you're doing enterprise scale, 100,000 machines or more, vulnerability assessment. So there's that whole series. 560 to 760, but we also have that 461. But if you're maybe going deep is not the best thing for you. Maybe instead you need to focus on web applications, because you really need to learn that, because it's where you find most of your work going. Now 560 does have a half a day of web application stuff. We go over SQL injection, cross-site request forgery, cross-site scripting, command injection, some of the top ones in that. But if you want more web app stuff, you'd go into the 542 and 642 classes. They're all on web app penetration testing. If you're more focused on the mobile stuff, maybe you're testing a lot of mobile apps and things like that, and the infrastructure associated with it, you could go into 575 and 617. 617 is on wireless, right, which mobile, of course, requires. So those are different ways you can go. Now, we also have a class called 573, and this is really interesting and kind of different. 573 is Python for information security professionals. So if you want to start automating things, whether it's in a pen test or whether it's in cyber defense or whether it's in forensics, it covers all three. We've got the 573 class for you. So it's really kind of a choose your own adventure branching thing based on what's most valuable for you. You could start with 560 and then you could jump into the deeper stuff. You could jump into the web stuff. You could jump into the mobile stuff or jump into the automation of things with Python. Now, please understand, 560 itself is plenty deep. I mean, we get into a lot of stuff and a lot of hands-on stuff. There's 33 labs. And labs run 15 minutes to 45 minutes. There's a lot of great lab work in 560. But there's a lot of places you can jump afterwards. Oh, and that is my clock signaling the top of the hour. But Jason, do you have another question?
The last question is, are we losing the battle?
Wow, that is quite a question. My clock is going to bong here. I wrote the Python code, by the way, that is playing this, in case you're wondering. Are we losing the battle? All right. I've been doing information security for 25 years. And I am happy to say that we're a lot more secure in absolute terms than we were 20 or 25 years ago. We patch better. The systems are harder. I mean, just look at Windows and how much better it is than 20 years ago, right? So in absolute terms, we're better. But here's the problem. The bad guys are getting better too. Their tools are getting more automated. They're getting more ingenious. They're finding more subtle flaws. And this is bad. So you can almost picture it as like a graph of information security defenses, and they're going up over time. Yay! But then if you look at the graph of the bad guys' capabilities, they're going up too. And my friend Josh Corman brought up this idea that he calls H.D. Moore's Law. You guys are, of course, familiar with Moore's Law, right? Moore's Law says that the density at which we can etch computer chips doubles about every 18 months or so, so they go about twice as fast. H.D. Moore's Law, according to Josh Corman, is this. If your defenses aren't getting better at least the rate of Metasploit's capabilities getting better over time, you're going to get owned. Because we can use Metasploit's increasing capabilities as a proxy for how good the bad guys are and how capable they are. So if you're not getting better, at least at the rate that Metasploit's getting better, you're going to get owned. Now, here's the deal. As an industry, I don't think we're getting better at the rate Metasploit's getting better. So, big picture, yeah, I think we're falling behind. In absolute terms, we're better. Yay! In relative terms, relative to the bad guys, we're not. And that's not good. So, but where do you go from that? I don't want to leave this webcast with you saying, oh, gosh, this is sad and horrible. You got to fight the good fight. You gotta be in there. You got to be in the game. You got to fight. You got to make the organization more secure. This is a time for people like you, people like us, to really give it our best and to make the world a more safe and secure place. I mean, so don't despair at this H.D. Moore's Law concept. Instead, to say there is great opportunity for making the world a more safe and secure place. And look, if that doesn't motivate you, that little inspiration there, how about this? Jobs. You want a good job? You want to get paid well? Great, do this stuff. Maybe you're not going to make the world safe and secure, but you'll always be able to support your family as long as there's a need for information security professionals. And that shows no signs of letting up. So there you go. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your great questions. Jason, you want to turn it over to you?
Awesome. Yep. Just want to finish with reminder, if you want to email me at jblanchard@sans.org, jblanchard@sans.org. If you have questions about what courses to take, you can also send emails to Ed. And then, Ed, anything left, or just turn it over to Carol? All right, Carol, can you wrap us up?
For your great presentation. Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Ed and Jason, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. Okay. Well, I was just thanking you both for your great presentation. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcast. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next